Let's see if this here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 76 Report. I'm Trish Regan. It's great to have you here. I'm here, as always, with my wonderful, esteemed colleague, Rob Hordon. And this is amazing, okay? This is amazing. So this afternoon, I'm planning out the show, and I'm looking at, for the Trish Regan Show, and I'm looking at a USA Today poll that came out. And Rob, I may have sent this to you. It basically showed that Kamala was ahead a little bit, but it was within the margin of error. And I'm like, I think they're getting a little ahead of themselves, kind of out over their skis, because as I've looked at some of the poll data, I really haven't quite seen it this way, especially when it comes to sort of, as we call it in TV, market by market, or in politics, it's state by state, right? When you go state by state, you see a lot of weakness, specifically in Pennsylvania that we've talked about, both here and on the Trish Regan Show, and other states as well. And so I just wasn't buying this poll, so to speak. I do think it tends to be a little bit of a psyop, but I want to get your reaction here, Rob, to this that came in, because this to me is pretty incredible. If you take a look, this is the, wow. I mean, this is the poll that Nate Silver is putting out. And Nate's a pretty straight shooter. This is the big picture, who is favored to win the presidency. And if you look at this chart, what it shows us is that Harris has now crossed into a more negative position, and Donald Trump is ahead by 52.4%. The numbers are not perfect. Nate points this out because there's still the possibility of having a tie in the Electoral College, but it's Trump 52.4% to Harris 47.3%. So I'm just kind of curious, Rob, if you can give me your reaction to that. Let me get this out of the way for just a moment, or I can shrink it. Again, this is a live program. We love having you guys here. Please make sure that you do me the favor and Rob the favor of subscribing to the 76 channel. It's important, believe me, really, really important right now. I'm just putting this sort of in between us so that everybody can see it as we talk about this. What's your reaction? I mean, I'm not entirely surprised. I just think, for whatever reason, the media is just not getting there. They want you to believe something different.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the trajectory. I suppose, so that's his model, and I've been reading a little bit about it, and it's kind of like a bottom-up model, almost like a financial model, where you go kind of state by state and then feed in all these inputs. And clearly, Trump on this upswing. I'm not sure when that
just within the last couple of days. I mean, it might actually perhaps be that RFK Jr. came into the equation, or, she just didn't get the bounce. I think when you look at his model, he had originally anticipated some kind of bounce factor happening for her coming out of the DNC. And that wasn't there, Rob. Like, she just didn't get, and it's amazing because the media attention has been like, whoa, like, she's greatest thing since sliced bread. Don't we love her, love her, love her? And the fact that she didn't get a big bounce out of that, they're probably going to blame Beyonce because Beyonce didn't show up. I'm kind of thinking that maybe he had to recalculate this. And in doing so, he had to effectively put her in a lower position.
Yeah. And the RFK news, I think in most of the media downplayed, but I think, what he's picking up on here, it really does seem to be impactful. And I can't imagine how it wouldn't be, given that RFK was polling in these key states, in the mid-single digits. And, if he can swing a couple of points in either direction, and these are undecided voters in the first place who are kind of in that, or uncommitted voters who are in that RFK camp in the first place. So, to me,
RFK camps, I mean, maybe Tulsi sort of helps a teeny bit on the margin in terms of momentum, but I think RFK was sort of one of those game changers for Trump, because even if it's only 4 points, like 4 points is 4 points in a close election, you'll take it. And then the other thing you got to think about is, I suspect one of the reasons why they're constantly pumping this rah-rah Kamala message in the media is because they want to actually just squelch any enthusiasm that they can, right? They want to diminish that enthusiasm among the base, because the hope is everybody will stay home, nobody will go and show up and vote, and so he won't get that turnout. But I think he's going to get it, and I think it's important for people to remember, hey, it's not over until it's over, and this new prediction from Nate Silver reflects exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, and look, it's a tight race. I mean, you kind of put weight on who's ahead versus who's behind, but ultimately, we're kind of plus or minus a few points, 50. So at least per his model, it's really a coin toss.
So let's think about it in terms of the market. Now, how closely they're tied, we'll see. I think, look, if she were to get through what she wants to get through, it's absolutely terrifying. It's very communist. It's very, very take your money to spread it around to everybody else. I mean, just, we've been through some of the policies. But when you look at market reaction today, I mean, you had some bad news out there, right? Nvidia. Actually, I'll take that back. That was great news. That was great news. I was really pleased that Nvidia had such a performance. It's just that, buy on the rumor, sell on the news really kicked in. It was bad news that Nvidia tanked like 6+%, but market was okay. Like we worry sometimes, everybody's in Nvidia and you kind of worry. It's one of the reasons in our model portfolios, which I'll give a shout out to right here, guys, in the model portfolios at 76 Research, we actually deliberately don't pick Nvidia because we think you get enough exposure in the broader market overall and there's better ways to play it. But do you think at all that these things are related? I mean, you look at Polymarket, he's ahead 2 points. You look at Nate Silver's prediction. I think investors want, dare I say, a Trump presidency.
Yeah, I think you could pick up, just tracking the market on days when, it seems Trump or Kamala are in the lead or where there's more favorable news. I think there's more market enthusiasm for a Trump win. And it just stands to reason. I mean, the tax programs, that they're proposing, the economic policies in general, I think are not favorable for investors specifically. They're not favorable for the economy in general. So it makes all the sense in the world to me that investors would prefer a positive outcome for Trump.
No, I get it. I mean, one of the things I think that they're just missing out on, and I played this earlier in my own program, but I think they forget that you can't just necessarily bank on a certain demo.
My name is Jasmine Woodson.
Hi, my name is Silla.
I'm Karen Watson.
I'm Yolanda Johnson from Georgia.
This is BB Diamond from New York City.
I'm Dana Galen, and I'm from Tampa, Florida.
I live in Hagerstown, Maryland.
Out here in Maricopa County.
Okay, so this is the campaign ad that the Trump team just released, and it's all these women that are African-American women that are saying, look, I'm voting for him. And they're kind of almost, in my estimation, trying to give some confidence to other people that may not be willing to come out and say, hey, I'm standing with him, I'm not standing with her. I think in some ways like this, the Democrats have kind of banked on a little bit too much. They're thinking, oh, well, she's clearly going to clean up on this portion of the vote. But Rob, we've been through the numbers. I mean, you look at where inflation is, for goodness sakes. And I think that you're underestimating people if you think that, they don't care about this, for example. Oops, sorry, that went right on your face. But yeah, I've got my handy little inflation chart here on the screen. And you look at these things, car insurance up 54%, K through 12 food up 66%, gasoline up 51%, electricity up 32%, groceries, et cetera. Like, these are things that people are dealing with. So when Ben Stiller, the actor, is asked in an airport, as he was sometime within the last 24 hours, hey, who are you voting? Is like Kamala, because we need change. It's like, wait a second, she wouldn't really bring change. I mean, maybe more inflation, but you don't want more of this because she's had 3.5 years. And I think these everyday folks all through America get it.
Yeah, and inflation really hurts, certain demographics more than others. I mean, the bottom end of the, income spectrum, right? So younger voters, or lower income voters, they're going to be the ones who are really going to be feeling the pain of the inflationary policies. When I think about the election in general, I mean, in terms of just thinking about it objectively, like who's going to win and what's the outcome going to be, the one fact that really comes to mind is that we had 15% more votes in 2020 than 2016. Mm-hmm. So there was a huge difference in turnout patterns, right? And that was because of the COVID related rules and other kind of get out the vote practices that went into play. And to me, like, the big variable is like, what's that going to look like in 2024? Because in terms of like on a state by state basis, what is the ability to like drive turnout? Because it was just a massive impact. I mean, a 15% increase.
So I mean, that's a really, really good point. And that's why I think that there's a method to the madness with the left constantly trying to kind of, make conservatives feel sort of bad and like they don't have a chance in H-E-double-L. And I'm like, wait a second. Okay. It ain't over till it's over. And, we still got some time to go. And these memories are quite significant for people. So, look, I think the market, it's hard. And you and I talked about this last time. Like, the market's going to do what the market's going to do. I mean, you might say, oh, gosh, well, like, how is it possible in any way, shape, or form that the market can even be this successful under this particular regime, under this particular crowd, given what we've seen? But look, they've generated a ton of inflation. And, like it or not, unfortunately, in an inflationary environment, shareholders tend to do better, right, than everyday folks, because those asset prices will go up compared to
I mean, I think
wages.
In a lot of industries, these are just businesses price their products in it's like a nominal economy, right? And if money is being debased, earnings and revenues and earnings that sort of grows, at least on paper. So it can be helpful. And if you're an asset owner or businesses are kind of built around these assets, they sort of benefit from that, at least just, kind of mathematically from the inflationary effect.
It's one of the reasons why I just keep saying to people, you got to be investing. We have 3 portfolios on the site. If you're worried about inflation, take a look at the inflation adjusted or the inflation protection portfolio. The other thing is the basic income builder. If you want to be generating some kind of dividend income when you retire, and the other biggie, obviously, and we can talk a little bit about Nvidia and AI, et cetera, would of course be the AI plays around Nvidia, and we get into some of that in our American Resilience portfolio. Peace of my mind, good to see you. Don Baca, good to see you. Douglas, good to have you here. Kathy, everybody, let us know if you have any questions. Peace of Mind is asking the areas, what would one invest in if Kamala wins? Maybe military and inflation protection stocks, because the thinking being, and Rob, you and I have looked at these numbers, especially vis-a-vis Lockheed Martin, and other big names in the defense space. It's amazing how well they've been doing ever since 2014, when we started to have more of a presence in Afghanistan, and they've really just taken off in the last 10 years, even beating the S&P at last check in the last 10 years. So that's sort of incredible, but it's in part, I think, how you have these global tensions that are increasing. So peace of my mind thinking about it, and this is smart, peace of my mind, because you want this from an investing standpoint. What do you want to be able to succeed, right? No matter what.
Yeah. And I suppose, greater chance that the forever wars keep humming along if Kamala does win here. Mm-hmm. I think, you do want to own businesses that can kind of aren't totally reliant on the political outcome, and who actually wins, and a lot of companies are can function sort of independent of that, right? I mean, there's going to be some that are more sensitive to just the overall economic performance than others, but if you own sort of strong franchise businesses with high quality market positions and strong market positions, as we've seen even under the Biden administration, a lot of those companies have performed very well. And when you think about AI, I don't know, that's sort of its own train, right? I mean, that's sort of technological progress and sort of the inevitable kind of march of mankind forward. I don't know how much of that's going to be. I mean, Trump, I know, is embracing policies that will really favor development of AI, and he's interested in that as an industrial policy, perhaps more so than the other party, but that's really kind of being driven by its own sort of internal dynamics.
Yeah, look, the AI play is super interesting. I can't say enough good things about it. I mean, it's scary. I get it, guys. But from an investing perspective, I just think there's tremendous opportunity there. And it's one of the reasons why, we think you need to concentrate on this space. And we've talked about Digital Realty, for example, as one stock. Yep. That kind of allows you to benefit from the AI play and the success of Nvidia. I see Don, who's a former CM, you were Chicago Merc, right? Don, he's joining the chat. CME trader, he's not a fan of Nvidia, in part because of the valuation levels. And look, there's a reason why Rob and I actually didn't include it in the resilience portfolio. And it's also because of the valuation levels, right? You start to get nervous when it's that big a portion, for example, of the S&P, and like it just keeps going up and away. But it doesn't mean that you don't believe in what it's doing as a company or you don't believe in the sector. And there's just a lot of different ways to play the sector that maybe are a little less high beta than something like Nvidia. So again, if you go to 76 Research, you can get the 76 report. I encourage you to do that for just $1. Code word dollar. I put it in the show notes. Code word dollar, DOLLAR. That's worth taking a look at because that kind of introduces you to investing and you get our read on everything pretty regularly. So you heard from us last night, you heard from us this morning, you'll hear from us again. But that's the 76 report. You can use code word dollar, 76report.com, or go to 76 Research. And then of course there are the model portfolios, which is a real value add for people. In fact, I think the numbers work out to just an additional $23 a month if you get one of the model portfolios. I encourage people to do that. Rich Betty joining from Maine. Hello, good to have you here. Kathy, hello as well. Michael, hello. Ag prices, Don is, the former CME guy. He worries that they'll continue to spike under Harris. I don't necessarily disagree with that. And I guess if you're an ag trader, those are things that you're keeping in mind. Commodities in general. I mean, we've seen oil, of course, go up under the Biden administration. And part of that is because there's less supply, because there was another headline today about how they're not going to allow drilling in Alaska. So all of these things start to take effect on things. I want to continue that, but before I do, CNN is out with its new interview, its big interview that they finally got. And I'm glad that she did the interview, Kamala Harris sitting down with Dana Bash. But she said something in particular that has me concerned once again about a Kamala Harris administration from an economic market inflationary standpoint. And I want to play this for you here because there's some clips out, and it's important to hear as she talks about the Inflation Reduction Act. I think we know there was no way in HELL that there was any inflation reduction going on. I mean, that's a giant joke. And she kind of admits it here because she talks about how wedded she is to some of these ideas that she was able to get through, which, let me be very clear, have nothing to do with reducing inflation.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed.
Okay. So she immediately pivoted to green energy and effectively in doing so admitted to the American public she never had any intention of reducing inflation. It was all about some of these other pet projects that she's so committed to that she needed to squeeze in there. Just to keep this all in perspective, what did they do? They passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And what did we then see? Sky high inflation. Inflation was bad enough. And then they got involved, passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which had nothing to do with reducing inflation, only with spending more money. And by the way, this is what she wants to do again. Rob, she wants to come in and give everybody $25,000 for your first home. And she wants to forgive all your student debt, regardless of what the Supreme Court says. And then on top of that, she's going to pay for it by going after all those people that bought a stock and it went up in value. It could sink tomorrow, but it doesn't matter. Kamala wants her fair share.
The way I interpreted her comments in that little clip, I felt she was basically saying, look, lately I've been kind of presenting myself and downplaying certain policies and, kind of showing myself to be more of a moderate, but my values haven't changed. It's just like the Inflation Reduction Act. I say one thing, but I really mean another. Don't worry about it. I say inflation reduction. What I really mean is Green New Deal and climate, aggressive climate regulation. So that's sort of my, impression of what she was trying to communicate to, I suppose, her base or her core voters who are worried that, it was like Bernie Sanders, his feedback on the convention, right? Like, wait, why are you guys acting so tacking to the center and acting so mainstream? And she's, I guess, providing some reassurance that no, she's the Kamala Harris.
She really is. Well, look, I don't think she's mainstream at all. Not when I hear what they're actually proposing. I mean, I don't think there's anything mainstream about any of these policies. In fact, if anything, we can look back on the Biden administration and think it was relatively quaint in comparison, given what she is proposing. I mean, price controls? Seriously? You saw this one.
As Attorney General in California, I went after companies that illegally increased prices, including wholesalers that inflated the price of prescription medication, and companies that conspired with competitors to keep prices of electronics high. I won more than $1 billion for consumers. So believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors. And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food.
Oh my God, she can't even say gouging. I mean, I don't think, how do I say this nicely? I don't think she's the brightest bulb on the planet. Unfortunately for her, unfortunately for the country. I mean, it's just sort of amazing that we can be in a situation right now where this particular woman is running for the presidency. But look, America didn't pick her. I mean, I think people need to remember that. Rob, America did not pick this woman who could very well be the president of the United States. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but crazier things have. And it happened kind of just out from under us, right? I mean, if you're a Democrat and you went to the polls and you voted for Joe Biden because they told you he was totally mentally competent, and then all of a sudden they're looking at the poll numbers and they know there's just no way that Joe's going to be able to pull it off, and they do a switcheroo. I mean, wow.
It's very strange. I mean, it's like America didn't vote for her. I mean, the Democrats didn't vote for her. No one in the primaries voted for her. In California, even if you go back and look at her, kind of path to the Senate in California, I think it was an uncontested. There was a primary challenger, but it was like an uncontested. So she was kind of the machine choice in making her way to the Senate to fill a vacancy. I've never seen any evidence that she really, has gone out and connected with voters and really, sort of won them over through her charm or charisma or whatever it takes for any politician to theoretically achieve success in American politics.
So it tells you, I hate to say this, but, because I want to transition a little bit to the deep state issue, given all that's happening, and this does relate back to investing, only, as somebody who believes passionately in AI, we're on kind of a cutting edge sort of moment or time, if you would, because if the wrong people get a hold of this and are just determined to squash speech, you could have a really kind of totalitarian style outcome. And it's very dystopian sort of in nature. And so it's a concern as an investor, it's a concern as an American. But she's somebody who's never won an election, but somebody liked her. Somebody out there, I'm assuming Obama, was like, this is it. This is our ticket. And given what we've seen thus far, it's not like Joe's doing a ton of work. It's not like Kamala's doing a ton of work. Wall Street Journal has a brand new article talking about all the many, many days that she spent out in California at these fancy schmancy parties with Hollywood actors while she was VP. So he's on the beach, she's out in Hollywood. It's like, who the heck's running the country? And I guess the team that wants to continue running the country.
Right. So she's sort of the figurehead for the party. She's being installed by the party, and it's just like unprecedented, and I think, we talked about it the other day. I mean, typically in the United States, you have these politicians who kind of have a groundswell of individual support and sort of lead the party. You don't have these individuals who are sort of picked by sort of nameless, faceless kind of influential figures, whether they're donors or whether it's Obama, in the party, just sort of saying, "Oh no, you're going to be the one who, is going to be president." And like really, her background, I mean, I guess she's kind of a conventional leftist. I've never really heard her say anything particularly interesting or sort of knowledgeable about foreign policy, economic policy, right? I mean, that's not her background at all. Her background, I guess, is as a DA, and she kind of knows her way around the social issues that she's interested in. Mm-hmm. But I think she's gonna sort of go with the flow, and she was named by the party leaders, whoever they are, and she'll presumably answer to them.
Right. So she won't have to work that hard. You get the other guys running the show. Look, people think she's basically financially illiterate. David Brooks saying that on NPR the other day. David Brooks is a New York Times columnist, a conservative, if they have one, at the New York Times. And he voiced that concern. You and I have talked about Tim Walz, who, doesn't even own a stock, for goodness sakes. This is the guy that would be the vice president, and he's earned six figures for the last however many years, 20 years, and he hasn't bothered to buy one stock or his home, and clearly doesn't believe in ownership, I guess. Either that or is just a spendthrift or not that bright.
30 plane tickets to China, round trip, that adds up, I guess. You can't...
Man, oh man.
That's in the New York Times, by the way. It's 30 over the years, 30 trips.
Oh my gosh. So it does add up. It does add up. I guess, you're choosing where to think about why would he go to China 30 times? I guess he was just that fascinated with it.
Maybe it was in connection with his work as a social studies teacher. I think of interest to him. Look, I've been to China a few times. It's a cool place to go. I went for work.
We won't hold it against you.
No, look, China's, we have a lot to learn from China in a lot of ways, when it comes to the economy and, kind of their version. I'm not praising China, but I'm sort of remarking as someone who's been there and witnessed, and sort of seen what they've created. Mm-hmm. They're capitalist in their own way too, which we shouldn't forget. But no, I think he certainly has a certain philosophical fondness for China. And when, we talked about the Democrat Party, when you think about the CCP and how things actually work in China, it's obviously not a democracy. It's a country that's ruled by a political party, called the CCP. And they have this process whereby they kind of internally select the leadership, and it's sort of opaque how it goes down. And it really feels like, are we moving in that direction where God forbid, we have sort of like a one party type system and no real democratic mechanisms to, feed the leadership of that party. And then you have this kind of technocratic state that, is governed in perpetuity by an unelected elite. So
it's an important thing to think about as we consider what's going on with Mark Zuckerberg. Here's the, forgive me, I want to show everyone on screen this letter. This is Mark Zuckerberg's letter. You can see it here, guys. Let me try one more time. Let's see if I can. All right, we'll do my best. You got to forgive my production skills here. But as you look at this, guys, what you see is Mark Zuckerberg doing this sort of mea culpa to Jim Jordan. And this is wild. I've been covering this like every day on my show. By the way, the New York Times has yet to cover this.
Yeah.
Weird, right? Like even the Washington Post, Bloomberg, like everybody is on it, but not the New York Times. And you would think as journalists, they should care about something like this. So they talk about how back in 2021, senior officials from the Biden-Harris administration, they're at the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire. You and I know the Babylon Bee guys. Those poor guys, right? Like there was they're hysterically funny. People should follow them. Just look at those headlines that they turn out. But they went through HELL and back with Facebook and other censorship areas. Twitter, People say this is why Elon bought Twitter. He was so stunned. His like favorite satirical site, it's like The Onion, except for the right, was getting shut down. Well, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down, and we own those decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. I believe, he writes, the government pressure was wrong. Duh. I mean, and then it gets worse. So a lot of the media covers that section, but then they don't cover this other section, which I highlighted here with my scribble, my big circle. In a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation around the Biden family and Burisma that led up to the 2020 election that fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations, including then Democrat presidential nominee Joe Biden's family. We sent that story to fact checkers, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I was one of the people. I tweeted that out. Biden had already come into the White House at that point. He was already in there. I tweeted a story, and oh my gosh, Facebook went nuts. They said, you have to take it right down right now. And so I'm like, okay, like, or your account's done for. And then because I took it down, it's like, you know, drinking but refusing to, what are the breathalyzer, like a drunk driving thing, right? Where they're like immediately, okay, you're guilty as charged. I was done. Like I couldn't get out to my audience for the course of the next year. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I lived this, and not only me, like so many of my friends that are conservatives and that are personalities in conservative media. It was crazy. And I'm just thinking, when we look at China and we look at what was going on, Meta can do what it wants, and they don't love politics. I get it. You know, I can do my cooking videos on Meta, you know, or sing a song. That's fine. They'll let me access the audience. They're not really good about politics. So be it. But it's very different when it's the government, in this case, the FBI, coming to them and saying, can't run this. This is disinformation, and putting that pressure campaign on them. I mean, that's where I start to get kind of worried. And if Mark Zuckerberg is smart, and we know he is, he ought to be worried too.
Yeah, and I mean, it was an interesting letter, and it's sort of trying to figure out what his motivations are. I mean, on the one hand, maybe he's just, this is how he feels, and he's extremely rich, and he's just being honest and expressing his, you know, there's no ulterior motive. He's actually expressing his real point of view. On the other hand, maybe he's seeing the writing on the wall, and this was addressed to Jim Jordan, right?
Yes.
So look, there's a very decent probability of 50% at least, perhaps, that Republicans will, you know, take the White House, maybe take the Senate. So he's going to have to answer to these guys. And, I mean, an apology or coming clean or an acknowledgement of just indisputable facts at this point, you know, it seems to be maybe, you know, something that it's a good starting point for him, you know, strategically in sort of dealing with.
Yes, he also called Trump and talked to him after the assassination attempt. I mean, people say, did it change Trump? I don't think it changed him one iota. Like, not, except it made him like, oh my gosh, like I really need to win now. But it might have had some effect, maybe, dare I say, on Mark Zuckerberg. I want to go to this clip. This is Mark Zuckerberg speaking with Emily Chang, who I used to work with. She does a tech show over at Bloomberg. And he tells her, like, this was really something to see.
I've done some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, you know, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, I mean, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. I mean, the historic events over the weekend. And I mean, on a personal note, it's, you know, I mean, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But look, I mean, it's, you know, and I think, look, it's, at some level as an American, it's like hard to not get kind of emotional about that spirit and that fight. And I think that's why a lot of people like the guy.
Yeah, I mean, really just incredible there. What we saw on that day. I mean, I remember, I think you were the first to tell me believe it or not.
I'm getting emotional too.
I think I was, downtown with my kids. We just had a late lunch, and I get a text, everyone, from Rob and a couple other friends are on a group text, and it's like, oh my gosh. It stopped me right on the sidewalk. Like I couldn't even move. And the kids are like, are you okay? I mean, it was just unbelievable. And it's crazy to think that was not that long ago. I mean, it was not that long ago. And now it's like wiped from everyone's mind. And Kamala Harris is like, I'm your safe. I mean, it's crazy. It was even at the time, like we were looking, you couldn't find the wealth of information that you would think that you would find on it, right? At that moment in time, I guess because that was just a bad set of facts in terms of the political momentum, right, for the left. I think they were going to take out Joe before that. I think they'd already made a decision to put in Kamala. It slowed it down by about a week.
Yeah, the timing of it, it's just so many kind of unpredicted, developments here in this election. But no, I think from Zuckerberg's point of view, I mean, I think he's being pretty authentic there because it is hard to. It's not so much that he, got shot, but the way he kind of instinctively acted, and like you really felt, in Trump's reaction that just a lot of emotion and a lot of like authentic feeling and just commitment and patriotism. And he's right, Zuckerberg's right. So maybe he's kind of coming around. I would say on in terms of, thinking about these guys, we talked about Nvidia, we talked about Meta and Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, it's just so important now. These Mag 7, I'm just thinking about in a political context, like these Mag 7 leaders and the individuals running these companies that represent like a third of the S&P 500 and are just kind of dominating AI now, right? And they're the ones buying all the Nvidia chips and building out all the data centers. They're going to own the brains of the economy, these hyperscalers. It's just interesting that we actually, from a political standpoint, we really do need to think about these giant tech juggernauts when there's only, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them that are just so influential now in our, not just our economy, but in our politics, our society. They control the flow of information, right? A little bit
clearly. I mean, look, it's you've got to think about it politically. You also got to think about it as an investor. I mean, look, I think that the reason China is never going to fully realize its potential is because it's run by a bunch of communists. It is the CCP. And the difference, I don't believe that you can fully, entirely, truly have capitalism without having these certain freedoms, including freedom of speech, including having all these freedoms that we hold dear as Americans. And so they do go hand in hand. And in order for these companies to really continue outperforming, because they've had a heck of a run, they've got to reach sort of this next plateau. And this next plateau, I'm telling you, is going to be great. I mean, I think that the world as we know it is going to change dramatically. You think about how much it changed, with the onset of the phone. And this is going to be that much more. So there's so many different, and you and I have talked about this in past. I encourage people to look at the library on the @76 research YouTube channel, because Rob and I get into all the different ways. And by the way, subscribe to 76research.com. Use code word $. Our gift to you, back to school season. You got to, get your financial life in shape as well. So code word $. For the first 2 months, and then it goes to $9.95. But it is so important to think about how to invest in these sectors. And the good news is, look, the U.S. is out in front. Whether or not we keep that edge. If I'm a tech CEO, I'm worried about that. I really am. If I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I'm like, I want us to keep this edge, but can I really keep this edge if I've got the FBI breathing down my back about this, that, and the other?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why, it's going to be, it's an important issue in the election, is really how do we deal with big tech? And and I don't know if the answer is just to let them do whatever they want. And certainly on the right, that's not, that hasn't been the feeling or the perception by a lot of people, that there is a desire, because they have so much influence over the economy now, and it's so immensely profitable and sort of share over the most important part of the economy. There is a feeling to, promote their success, but at the same time to kind of, contain them or to sort of, put the interests of the American people first when you think about, from a regulatory perspective or an antitrust perspective. So I think it's going to be a very interesting, kind of back and forth. It almost reminds me of going back 100 years to, when you had the big trusts sort of competing with the federal government and like which one was more powerful. We're seeing that play out in real time, and it's only going to become more relevant as, we kind of get deeper into AI and all of these business models evolve, and really significant social changes start to furled.
Take place, of course. No, there's a lot. I mean, that's why it is such an incredibly important election. Back to communism for a moment. I want to share with you what one of Kamala Harris's advisors had to say on CNBC. So I don't really usually get that worked. Oh my gosh. Like, I was just spitting bullets after I saw this one. I mean, this guy, for him to try and insist that somehow taxing unrealized gains on stock market positions is the same as a property tax is bonkers. And, for NBC, granted, Joe's very conservative, but even Becky, she's not always like playing her hand that way. I mean, she was even all over this guy on CNBC in the morning. I want to get your reaction and the viewers' reaction to this, because this is, it's kind of like theft. I think it's totally unconstitutional. But this guy, has a different view, clearly.
Well, unrealized gains, taxing unrealized gains just doesn't seem fair in any sense of the word. In the very best sense, if you are taxing unrealized gains, all you're doing is pulling forward the taxes that would be paid later when someone actually sells the stock.
I think that this reaction to unrealized gains is a little funny, given that I bet that the majority of people watching right now are already paying a tax on unrealized gains. It's called a property tax. When the value of your home goes up,
it's a use tax.
When the value of your home goes up, you pay higher taxes even if you don't sell your home.
Your value of your home never moves the way a stock moves, the way something else moves. That's always the go-to answer. It's also, property tax is a use tax. You're paying for the schools, you're paying for emergency services. Those are things that make absolute sense.
And sure, and all the revenue that comes in from these unrealized gains taxes and the other taxes in the Harris plan are going to go to creating what she calls more opportunity. It's to make sure that every newborn born in this country gets $6,000.
Using the services.
Well, look, you're arguing that this is some sort of foreign concept that's completely unknown in the U.S. tax code.
It's probably unconstitutional. It's probably, and it was never in anyone's intent to tax.
It's not an income tax,
and it's never going to happen. Probably. Not in, well, I'm not going to say my lifetime.
I wouldn't say that.
Not in Becky's lifetime.
I've done some stuff.
So that was kind of amusing, and she even came in. She said, "I wouldn't say that. Not in my lifetime. Not." In other words, she's saying, "Look, it's real." And I would point out that what do they start around 3-4% for an income tax, and then the next thing you know, it's basically 50%. I mean. It's not that I'm talking all in, but I'm sorry, like this is one slippery slope. They're like, oh, it's only people with 100 million. Well, I just say, like, look,
for now.
You know what? Yeah, that's for now. That's for now, because then it's going to slide down to 50 and then 25, and the next thing you know, $1 million. If you have $1 million in assets in your 401k and in your home, hey, it's fair game for the government. Or they'll go after, $500,000. You get a $500,000 home and combined assets in your equity portfolio. I'm sorry, like I don't trust this one single bit.
No, all right. So there's a lot going on here. It's really, we have to think about it as
I'm keeping my blood pressure down.
We have to think about it.
I get my Irish up, but go ahead. There is a lot going on.
So we're moving away from the principle that the government has the right to tax certain financial transactions, like when you receive income or when you monetize an asset, right? Like that's a financial transaction, and now it's just assessing like a levy on the value of something that they will control how it's valued. So when you think of unrealized gains, there's nothing. It's really just a wealth tax. It's really just an asset value tax, right? The only difference between taxing an asset based on its value versus taxing it's just sort of starting from like a higher basis. So instead of taxing 2% of the entire value, maybe they'll tax 20% of the increase in the value over the last few years, right? So, but it lands you in the exact same place, which is you're paying taxes based on a percentage value of the asset. In the property tax analogy, so they always like to use analogies to kind of change the rules, right? Or to kind of normalize concepts that shouldn't be normalized. When you think of a property tax, you pay property taxes on your home. That is a tax that's really connected with the asset itself. Where you buy the home, that there's a certain level of property taxes that any owner of the property has to pay to like the municipal government. And that's how the municipal government kind of funds its operations. And then
and you get something for that, right? Theoretically, unless you live in New York City, which is one of the reasons I don't live there anymore. I mean, I moved down to New York and I'm like, oh my gosh, my tax dollars actually go to something. It's amazing, right? You have schools, you have parks, you have community centers, all that good stuff.
But the tax attaches to the asset, in that property tax situation. Here, they just want to apply asset wealth taxes or kind of asset-based taxes just to sort of your whole, whatever they choose it to be, right? Whether it's your equity portfolio or your, whatever investments you have, real estate, and that's just an open-ended
family farm.
A family farm. So then it just becomes open-ended. It just becomes subject to like the political process. So the legislature, I guess, or executive order, they'll decide which of your assets and what the rules would be in terms of what percentage of them the government gets to take at any given time. So it's really opening Pandora's box. And and also we talked a little bit earlier about, the idea that, valuation is very, one of the advantages of taxing financial transactions is that there's not like dispute over valuation. When you start getting into the realm of asset-based taxation, now you're talking about, the need to kind of ascribe value to different assets, and, markets ascribe value to assets. It shouldn't really be the government that does that, and valuations fluctuate. Nvidia is down 6% today. There's constant transition. So it's a really, really dangerous idea that sounds maybe relatable at first, but can really.
It's so not. No, and it's troubling. It really, really is troubling, because I think this is where she's at. Okay. It's not about capitalism. It's not about growing the pie for everyone. It's not about a strong America. For goodness sakes, her own hubby went out and did some appearance. This is great, Rob. I got to show you this. This is just actually fantastic. This tells you everything need to know about where this party is right now. So he goes out, I guess he's in Michigan, and he does an appearance and he starts to say USA, and he starts to try and get this chant, and people are afraid to say it. They won't even say USA. So he's like, it's okay. You can say it. He's there with Gina Raimondo, right? And Gina, who's in the administration, Commerce Secretary, she can't even say USA. It's like these people are just, they're off in left field, literally.
USA. So USA. You can say it.
No. You can say it. It's okay, guys. You know what? It's okay to be patriotic. What has happened to our country when you can't even actually voice your approval, right? For this base, and then you wonder why it looks like Donald Trump is pulling ahead in the Nate Silver poll. I'm telling you, people are over it. They are really sick of this anti-USA movement, this moment. They can't even say the words in Michigan.
I had not seen that before. That is quite funny.
Just came in, hot off the presses. Yeah. We're live. You can put up with my, computer skills. You're all right.
It kind of reminds me of Colbert when, he made that point about CNN. He said it like flatly that they were objective, and then the audience like laughed, right? It's like the audience reaction was just not what was anticipated, but there was like a lot of truth in it. I feel like, it's this idea that, is saying USA, is that problematic? Is that, because really their whole party is opposed to kind of the principle of nationalism and of pursuing the national interest, right? So
because Trump represented that, so therefore they can't.
Well, they don't believe in it, right? They don't believe in borders. They don't believe in sovereignty. I don't think they believe in nationalism as a valid driving force or political force, or they take a more universal kind of collective human collective kind of perspective. So it's actually makes sense that none of those people would really be interested in chanting USA. I mean, I think Doug, or the first
well, he knows,
gentleman,
he has to, I call him Dougie. Dougie has to do that, right? I mean, but I'm sorry, like, this lady does not know how to pick him. I mean, the guy, sorry to be so catty, but really, I mean, like, he took off with the nanny. Like, he's not exactly the picture of manhood, shall we say, in more ways than one. And it, it's just coming off Willie Brown and then winds up with Dougie. I'm sorry. But anyway, yeah, he had intended to be like, USA, USA, and nobody knew what to do. And the shocking thing is, it wasn't just the audience, it's even the Commerce Secretary, who a lot of people think within the business community is not that bad. And I'm like, she must be. She's just clueless. This same lady, so long as we're on Gina Raimondo, this is unbelievable. Did you see the clip the other day where she's actually going to sit there and defend nonsense? The Labor Department reporting that, hey, jobs didn't grow by some 800 and something thousand. And Gina Raimondo is asked about this, and she tries to accuse this. She's trying to say that this is somehow a lie. And I'm sort of stunned. Here we go. You know, I've talked about it in the past, but let's let the viewer weigh in.
When you hear that, do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No. When I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it, because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah. Okay. So she wants to just pretend like she doesn't know what's going on, Rob, because, I'm amazed because, look, maybe I'm just a news hound because it's what I do, but, you've spent all those years on Wall Street. You kind of need to know what's going on in the real world too. She's clueless.
I mean, had she never heard, was she unfamiliar with the Department of Labor or the Bureau of Labor?
No, she knows what the Department of Labor is. She ought to know what non-farm payrolls are. She ought to know that they are historically kind of off on those things. And yet immediately, she's just kind of having this out-of-body experience, much like she was with Dougie Boy, not knowing what to do. It's like her instinct is just to attack Trump. Department of Labor, your own Department of Labor and your own administration lady is saying this, and you somehow immediately think it can't be true. Any criticism can't be true.
If there's any inconvenient fact, you just sort of attach it to Trump, and then you say Trump is a liar or doesn't have credibility, and then you move on, right? It's
terrible.
Or maybe you go to retired intelligence, senior intelligence.
You can lead the next campaign the next time, somebody's in trouble with their laptop.
Right? You don't have to engage in the debate. You don't have to have a thoughtful, informed debate on a policy matter. You just smear your opponent and attach the problematic point or fact to your opponent and call it misinformation and move on to the next.
I guess what's amazing about this to me is how Americans, though, are seeing through it. Again, if you go back to the Nate Silver poll and the fact that Donald Trump is ahead now, despite everything that they've been trying to do, what is the rationale in your view? How is it that Americans are able to cut through the noise that's out there? Is it because of platforms like this? Is it because the media has changed so drastically just in the last couple of years that people are able to reach better, more truthful, more transparent sources of information?
Look, Twitter, X, it gets a lot of views and a lot of information. Everyone has access to it, and a lot of important information comes through on that platform in particular. I think is really influential. But other internet platforms, and people communicate with one another and share information. It is remarkable, though. When you think about the media, I've always been a political junkie, watching, ever since I was a kid, right? Watching network stations or watching the McLaughlin Group, when I was little,
Oh, that's cute.
The arguments, the back and forth, and there was a real back and forth, and there was a presentation of the left-wing perspective and the right-wing perspective. And, there was some degree, the media has historically been somewhat biased to the left, but there was some effort at balance. But nowadays it's like, I think there's really been like a transition that's occurred, and I don't know if it's in the last 5 years, and maybe it's cultural, maybe it's generational.
It could be cultural. It is generational. It's also technology, right? Like the technology, the fact that I'm sitting here doing this with you live right now. It takes a certain amount of bandwidth. It takes a certain amount of horsepower in terms of the internet. We used to have to hire live trucks to be able to do this on network news. And it was a big deal. Like if you got a 10-second live tag at the end of your little spiel, you do, like a minute 30 on whatever. And in my case, it might be the market or the jobs report or something. And then you get 10 seconds to wrap it up. But they paid a ton of money for this live truck. A total waste of resources, by the way, just in more ways than one. But, that was a fortune to do that. And now it's nothing. And so the media industry is changing so incredibly fast, and it's remarkable. It's exciting to be part of. It's exciting to be here. A reminder, you guys, subscribe to this channel. If you're watching, please do us that favor. Hit the bell so you know when we're live. I want to go to an interesting clip that just came out. This is Jesse Watters, my former colleague at Fox. He's a personality. He's got sort of his own way about him, and he's, for the most part, I think pretty darn truthful. He said something regarding Kamala and how she's tethered, if you would, to Joe Biden. He's like, heck, like she was there. She was the last person in the room. And then he starts questioning her foreign policy chops. All fair game. He says something, by the way, like my head didn't go there. That was, one of his co-hosts immediately put some innuendo around what he said. And now you've got Kamala's husband's ex-wife. Let's make sure I get that right? The ex-wife of the hubby, Dougie. She's out there saying this is terrible. He never should have said this. You've got a congresswoman who's going nuts on Jesse for this one. And then you've got Twitter lighting up saying the guy needs to get fired for this. It's just ridiculous. Let me play you the clip. And then we got to talk about the media and the change and Disney and Fox and all these other players as investing strategies.
It's been 3 years since Kamala boasted about being the, quote, last person in the room when Joe Biden decided to go ahead with the Afghanistan withdrawal. Jesse, people consider you to be the last person in the room because that's because everybody keeps trying to ditch you.
Yeah, they just left. Right. But you understand the reference, Greg.
Yes.
Is that she was somehow involved in the decision, and it was her wise guidance that he was relying upon. Listen, she was the last in the room in Afghanistan. She was the border czar, and she was the deciding vote on trillions of inflationary spending. On those three most popular Joe Biden items, she's basically like a conjoined twin. You cannot separate the two. And let's talk about foreign policy. What is her foreign policy? And this is where the president has his most impact. You have a lot of room to maneuver there as commander-in-chief. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she believes. She's going to get paralyzed in the Situation Room while the generals have their way with her. Right now,
Jesse Watters. Jesse, I don't like that.
Figuratively,
Take
again,
it back.
Have their way with her, control her, not in a sexual way.
Okay, like I just so didn't get that, like whatever. But the idea that it's created this whole hoopla around it and people are, Jesse should be fired. Like, be careful with Fox. They actually could. Like, been there, done that, seen that, right? I've seen that movie before. But what's crazy is that, he in some ways is more enabled in this environment because if they did say, okay, Jesse, you went too far, we think you did mean something bad by that, and they pulled the rug out from under, guess what? There's this whole new world out there. And so, again, sort of in this podcasting universe, streaming universe for content creators like a Jesse or myself or Bill O'Reilly or any of these people that have moved on in certain capacities. Dan Bongino, another great example, left Fox, but he's killing it, right? I think everybody's sort of killing it on their other platforms. What does that tell you about investing in a Fox or even investing in a Disney in light of this trepidation that so many of these media companies have? We've got to be woke. We can't say anything that we're not supposed to say. And yet content's king. And they're not necessarily able to make it as liberally, I'll use that word, as they might like to.
It makes me think of the letter that Zuckerberg sent, just to go back to that, because you think about what's in his interest. Does he want to be like corporate media like Fox News or like the network news, where they really kind of limit the type of content that he can monetize and present, right? Because that might not be in his financial interest or business interest. Maybe he doesn't want the federal government dictating, what sort of content appears on his platform. Or
I'd rather be Facebook any day of the week than thank you very much, Fox News, right? You just look at the valuations on these companies, and Fox, Disney as well. I mean, there's just not a ton of value. We've talked about Disney in the past, and we can get into that in a second, because I know parks and themes, I mean, look, they're struggling too, right? Because inflation is cutting into what they can offer their customers. If you're a media company, you're kind of yesterday's news, unless you're in this content creation and streaming industry.
And just look from a platform's perspective, like if they have to throttle their content creators and limit them to the most anodyne, kind of unoffensive content that no one's, kind of interested in, then they're not going to have a lot of eyeballs, right? I mean, it's sort of like, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, you can't say this, you can't use this word, that word. No one's going to watch it. It's completely pointless and boring. So if I'm a platform, I don't want to be, sent down that path. Or if I'm a news organization where I can only, I have to just echo like the White House talking points. I have to be like,
I mean, you're state media effectively at that point.
It's just, you're not going to get good ratings because
therefore you're not going to make money. But you're talking just ratings. Okay. So like, ratings aside, it's not just ratings, right? It's also growth and future. And what does next year and the following year and 10 years look like from now? So like, as I get all excited about AI and we're writing, and you've had such tremendous analysis, again, a shout out for the growth portfolio, American Resilience, go check that out in 76research.com. When you think about these opportunities in these sectors, it's not like you're like, okay, oh boy, I got to hold Fox News or even Disney. I mean, maybe if Disney gets low enough, Don Baca, I see in the comments, is joking that you and I should team up with Elon and we should buy Disney. I mean, I don't know as I'd want the headache of Disney right now, not until it gets to a much, much more attractive valuation. The reason being that you have so many legacy employees there that have this woke mindset. And unless you really clean house, and that's hard to do with a company that's so big. I mean, it's a great brand. So look, at some point it becomes cheap enough that you start to say, hey, maybe this is worth a look. But where's the future at Fox or Disney or frankly, any of these content creators? I mean, this is why, incidentally, Bob Iger can't wait to get rid of ABC News. Just can't wait.
Disney's interesting now that we have like a few more months under our belt since the activist campaign, and kind of like seeing what's going on, because it really had collapsed after Nelson Peltz lost the proxy challenge, and there was this we were kind of indicating like, okay, look, there's this core theme park business, the experiences segment, that's sort of like the foundation of value in that company, but there's another kind of possibility here. And I was reading some research recently that was sort of articulating this perspective from the short side. The short thesis on Disney is that they've really been milking that theme park business for cash flow for so long to kind of compensate for the declining media business and entertainment business, that they're doing such sort of irreparable harm to it. And I think there was an article in the Journal or the Times recently about people, it's so expensive now to go to Disney. People are assuming vast amounts of consumer debt to just take a vacation. It's not really a sustainable situation. So I've seen this in a lot of different industries. You have like you have a healthy business paired with like a weak business, and then you kind of abuse the customer on the healthy business or jack up prices excessively, and you undermine that business, or you retailers do this that struggle sometimes, where they'll cut back on customer service, and then like in this food in the supermarket, like the store won't be as clean because you're trying to build cash flow, right, to kind of keep your earnings even as the one part declines. And there's a very real risk that maybe that core foundation of value for Disney, the theme park business, isn't as reliable, or as is more vulnerable now, the way they've kind of managed it over the last several years.
I mean, it's worth, look, I think this is a really, really important point. I look at Disney, which actually traded up today 0.3%. It's trading around $90, 89.81 a share. And, these are concerns. I mean, I think they're legitimate concerns. It's crazy, right? Because this company not too long ago was trading around $200 a share. And so it's seen its valuation cut in half. But unless it's able to kind of return to its magic, right? And produce content that's not just another sequel, that's not just another woke agenda machine, I really question whether they're going to be able to get out of this rut. And I'd love to see more activists in there. I really would.
Yeah, I think it's probably fixable, and maybe it should be broken up, and maybe it should, because, look, I don't have a firm view on whether that theme park business is in structural decline or not, but I mean, there should be real value there, and there could be a way to kind of monetize the streaming assets and just break up all the pieces. So someone could come in there and
that's kind of what he's trying to do, though, right? I mean, that's what Bob is. He's like, okay, I want to sell every television business. I want to sell ABC News. Good luck, Whoopi. I want to sell ESPN even, because what's of value there? Think about it. It's the actual rights. It's no longer the distribution. It's no longer the cable channel. It's actually, the NBA or the NFL, whoever owns the rights, the actual leagues themselves that are the real value, because they could go out tomorrow, get a few cameras going, and do exactly what we're doing here. And by the way, it's going to be even greater, because those AI goggles, whoa, like those, the Apple Vision Pro, man, like we're going to be in the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a worthwhile question. Like, what is the value add of ESPN in the sense of, okay, you have like kind of a group of people who kind of comment about the event. I mean, that's, because it used to be more about the actual, just the physically connecting.
A lot of those broadcasters, right? They've gotten into the same sort of trouble because they say something that's politically not aligned, or, that, especially during 2020, we saw a lot of that. And there were a lot of big stars from ESPN that either quit or were fired and then went out on their own. And what do you know? They can do the exact same thing. They don't really need ESPN as a distribution channel because they already have a name. They already have a brand. And so, I mean, if I'm Bob, I want to be rid of those things so fast. Now, private equity firm could come in. I mean, Nexstar, I happen to know because I know people, that is something that they've looked at. I don't know if they're getting close, but they've looked at Disney. Maybe it works for a Nexstar, but those businesses, whether it's PE or Nexstar or whoever, they're going to kind of just bleed whatever cash they can out of it. So they're going to want to reduce the salaries for the personnel. And, good luck, Whoopi, negotiating your next deal, or the ESPN anchors, et cetera. So they reduce. They even, to a certain extent, not to diss poor Jesse, but I guarantee you he wasn't the same payday as Tucker Carlson. I guarantee you Fox saved a bundle on that one. That was like, woo, ka-ching, we're done with Tucker. We don't have to deal with him anymore. And we just saved ourselves a bundle. And they paid out his contract, similar to what happened with me, right? But they just saved a lot of money. They didn't have to put Trish Regan on at 8 p.m., and it's not just me. It's also the entire staff, right, that would actually be there producing that show. They'll save that at ABC News when they get rid of The View. And they will, or at least it'll be a very different kind of programming, not with a live audience, all this stuff, because the cost savings matter. So I look at this, and having worked at network news programs like a CBS, where they didn't have a cable arm, and way back then they certainly didn't have a streaming arm, they were looking for profitability wherever they could get it. They didn't care about being third place, because you could still make something as long as you just paid people less. So I look at what's going on in cable. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like that all over again. It's like network news got demoted when cable came onto the scene, and now cable's going to get demoted because ultimately it's the content itself. And the distribution channel is whatever we want.
In tech, they have this idea of like the flywheel, right? Where it's like things just keep getting better and better and better as you grow. Mm-hmm. But it's like with traditional media, it's like in reverse, right? It's like, because once you start getting cheap, it's like, our viewership's going down. We got to start cutting costs, lowering the production value, getting inferior talent. I mean, that's not headed in a good direction. And you're completely. So it's sort of like a terminal decline situation.
That's why I look at these media stocks, and it's like, wow. I mean, we mentioned Disney. Let me just look at shares of Fox.
Look, the Disney media assets, the market is essentially saying they're worthless with Disney around $90 a share. That whole edifice of entertainment and media. They're not really being valued. They're only giving any value to that theme park business.
Wow.
That's quite a statement, for the market to feel that way. And maybe the market's wrong.
I mean, look, the film business, I would think, would be worth something, though. The Star Wars franchise, all of that.
Yeah, but I'm
discounting that too, or is it just the sort of news and?
Look, I think most people would say, like, on a if you could separate the businesses, there would be buyers for the various pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying, like, when you look at the overall valuation of Disney, and at $90 a share, I mean, that's why the activists got in the first place. They explicitly said so. They said, hey, that's the floor value. You put everything at zero, and that's just what the theme parks are worth after you deduct the debt.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm looking at Fox, and basically it hasn't moved in 5 years. It's gone down and then come back up. But, in 5 years ago, it was around $38 a share. Today, it's around $38 a share. That does not surprise me. I mean,
by the way,
yeah.
Trish, no, just on that, like, just as an investment point, because it's actually very painful to hear when you're in a stock.
Because inflation, by the way, has gone. Your dollars are worth less. So inflation adjusted, Fox has tanked.
On the one hand, you could be like, yeah, I didn't lose any money over 5 years. You lost,
you did.
You could have been in another stock that had a future, that had better prospects, that went up. You could have just been in the S&P 500, and you picked the wrong one, and you have it's one thing to lose money, but like not making money over a long period of time, and it's sort of a dead asset. It's very damaging financially, from an investment point of view. So those value traps, those kind of broken businesses, you got to pay attention, and not just say, hey, this stock's cheap. And like that, Disney sets up as one of those risks, right? Where as a value investor, and I've sort of trained as a value investor, you're saying, hey, I'm getting all these extra assets that are implicitly valued at nothing, but maybe 5 years from now, you'll wake up and the shares will still be 90 and nothing got fixed, and you're in the same
situation. And your
dollar's
worth less.
And you've missed,
right?
And your dollars are worth less, and you could have
invested.
It's
really technically it's less than 38. I mean, it's just, because $38 5 years ago is very different than $38 in terms of purchasing power today. So
you take 20% off right there. Yeah.
And the opportunity, I love that you referenced opportunity cost. My uncle was an economist, still is an economist. He ran the UConn, University of Connecticut Department of Economics. He's a really interesting guy. And when I was quite young and I wanted to be an opera singer, because yes, and some of you know that I sing, he sat me down and gave me a really interesting talk on the opportunity cost of becoming a singer. And I'll never forget it. And that word just always stuck with me. I was like, yeah, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And I did for a little bit until I really started thinking about the opportunity cost. So when you take a given career path, you have an opportunity cost, right? What are you giving up to go pursue this as opposed to that? When you're choosing a stock, you have an opportunity cost. And your opportunity cost has been pretty severe in Fox, because you know what? You could have bought Nvidia. Not that you would have exactly bought that. That's perhaps too extreme. But you could have just been in an S&P 500 index and made out like a bandit.
Yeah, done quite well, yeah.
All the more reason. Subscribe. You guys, it's code word dollar. Let me see if I can put it in the chat. We have so many people tuning in, which is wonderful. I'm going to actually see if I can just add this right here into the chat right now, because I want you to take advantage of this. It's code word dollar, DOLLAR. And if you do that, you get the first 2 months at just $1 each. Make sure, obviously, you subscribe to this channel and you hit the bell and all that kind of good stuff. But it's code dollar. So I'm putting this into the discussion, and it's 76 report or 76research.com. I like sending people to 76 Research only because that is where you're going to see the model portfolios as well. So check out the model portfolios. And this is where you would actually see, your chance to get like the resilience portfolio, or the inflation protection portfolio, or the income builder portfolio, where we have, or, you can get them all. You can be part of our Founders Club, which is the most economical way to do this, and get everything, including the 76 report. So, wow. It's just a crazy time, and there's so much change coming. I will watch the interview tonight for everyone, and I'll have a readout on tomorrow's show. Rob, you probably will too, just, because you do, and I do. We put ourselves through these painful moments because it's part of the business. But hopefully everybody else is going to have a grand old evening and not turn on CNN. I'll be back on the Trish Regan Show tomorrow. Do subscribe to 76 Research, our YouTube channel here, because you know what? You're going to get a lot of information, lots and lots of clips about investing coming your way, investing in other stuff too, right? Hey, Rob, good to see you.
Okay, great to see you, Trish.